What I have for you today is an absolute treat, and you really ought to see it. Faker is the best player in the history of the game, and even now in his mid to late 20s, which is old for a pro gamer, he is still a top tier player. Sure, there have been some talks recently that he's a bit washed, sometimes in solo queue he tends to die to these highly mechanical one tricks, but he's still the GOAT. He is still Faker, and I want to analyze one of his games. But why this game? It doesn't even look that special. He didn't even get a pentakill or drop 20 kills, a 606 scoreline? Who cares? You know what? That's exactly the point. This is a game that includes high-level wave management concepts, perfect trading patterns, immaculate spacing, and ridiculously good team fighting. What I love is that this is an otherwise indistinguishable game in his match history, something that you might scroll right past a standard 20-minute FF where he didn't die. It was probably just a stomp, right? Well, no. This is a game that if Faker played any worse at all, they probably would not have won, and that's what I love about going over this replay. This match just goes to show how cool League can be when it's played at this level. All of the nuances and complex things explained in a way to help you understand and hopefully improve. Faker isn't just the best player of all time, he's undoubtedly the best LeBlanc ever as well. The best player ever on his best champ. Let's watch it. In order to perform at a top level in League of Legends, you need to play like a challenger, but in order to play well IRL, you need to make sure that you eat right. If you like cooking but find it hard to either have the time for it or know the exact portions to buy without being wasteful, then today's sponsor HelloFresh has us both covered. HelloFresh is amazing because you can get delicious recipes and exact portions delivered right to your door. Sometimes after a long day, you don't even know what you want to make. I tend to just stare right at my fridge and think, I don't know what I want to do here. Each week there are 50 wonderful and yummy options to choose from, and they rotate every week, so not only are you not getting burnt out on eating the same thing all the time, but you're also encouraged to try new stuff. It's honestly a win-win. You know who else wins? The environment, because the exact portions and reduction of single-use plastic means that so much less is going to waste compared to takeout restaurants or the grocery store. They are the world's first carbon-neutral meal kit company, with nearly all of their packaging being recyclable, so it doesn't even matter if you want to just save money, just eat delicious food, or just get in the habit of cooking more often, because HelloFresh helps you do all of that. Which is why you should use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use code POGEXILJuly16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the purchases. Thank you very much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Since our mid lane matchup is LeBlanc versus Yone, I want to make sure that everyone watching at least knows all of their abilities so they can fully understand what's happening. I will not be explaining all 10 champions' full kits in this game, just abilities that are important when they come up. As we said, Faker is on the LeBlanc, a high-intensity burst mage with a lot of cool tricks. Her Q is a simple point-and-click damaging ability that leaves a mark over the target's head. This mark can be popped to deal even more damage by any of her other abilities. For example, you could hit them with a Q and then follow up with a W. Speaking of her W, it is her bread and butter ability. You dash forward dealing big damage in this area. What's cool is that you have a time window to reactivate W if you choose to do so, blinking back to where you came from. LeBlanc's E is a chain ability. You will throw out this rope or tether sort of thing, and after a brief time, if the enemy is still connected to it, they will be rooted in place, take big damage, and unable to move. LeBlanc's ultimate ability is very unique. It actually allows her to mimic or copy her other 3 abilities. Whatever ability she most recently used, that's what her ultimate key will do. So if you throw a chain with E, and then press the R key right after, it will throw another chain. Yone is the other mid laner, and he's a cool melee fighter. He uses his swords in the wind to slash up his enemies. His Q is a powerful stab attack that can be used nicely in between his standard right clicks. After landing 2 Qs successfully, the third one is powered up, becoming a dash that also throws a tornado with him, knocking up enemies. His W is pretty simple. It just swipes in a cone in front, dealing damage, and if it hits something, it will give him a shield. His E places a spirit behind him. During this time, he moves faster and amplifies his own damage. The idea is that you want to press E, unload a big combo onto your enemy because it will deal more damage, and then after a few seconds, he will snap back. Funny enough, it's a somewhat similar ability to LeBlanc, but this is just happenstance. It's worth noting that in this case, we cannot choose whether or not to go back. Yone must go back every single time. His ultimate dashes forward, dealing damage in this rectangle, and if it doesn't hit anything, it will travel the full distance. If it hits a champion, it will instead stop immediately and knock the enemy into the air. Now that we understand more about the mid lane matchup, let's quickly break down the purpose of each team composition. In the top lane, it's Fiora versus Taric. Fiora is a hard carry champion who needs resources to be effective. If she gets ahead and gets her items, it's a massive advantage. Taric, on the other hand, is quite the opposite. He's a supportive tank who likes to heal and shield his allies, and he's meant to help them. You'll see this Taric move around the map a lot to try to create leads that way. The jungle matchup is Bel'Veth versus Lee Sin. Bel'Veth is a strong mid to late game jungler, meaning roughly past the 10-minute mark or so is when she really comes into her own. She does really well also after getting crucial objectives, and she does get stronger as the game goes on. Again, Lee Sin is kind of the opposite in this case. He wants to have strong presence on the map early and look to play around the enemy jungle and be destructive. Ideally, Lee Sin will help put the enemy so far behind that it's no longer recoverable. Finally, the bot lane matchup is very similar in style. Zeri and Yuumi for Faker's team, and Aphelios Lulu for the enemy. The carries are Zeri and Aphelios, both of them need time and resources and are huge hyper damage dealers late game, and both supports are healing and shielding enchanters that like to buff up their allies. As a final note, Faker is laning and playing against a popular streamer named Nemesis. Even though Faker wins this game, this isn't necessarily a knock to Nemesis. There's two reasons for that. Number one, as you'll see throughout the gameplay, the enemy bot lane Aphelios and Lulu probably should have been able to carry this game to the finish line since they got a big lead early on. The second reason is that this isn't necessarily a favorable matchup for the Yone either. Regardless, Nemesis didn't think that he couldn't beat Faker's LeBlanc or something like that because the very next game that same day, only about 20 minutes later, Faker would go up against him again on LeBlanc, and this time he didn't win. Nemesis did not ban LeBlanc in the next game and was able to pick up the W in the Corki matchup. The game starts and already we are looking for action because they're calling for an invade into the top side of the map. The reason they want to do this is because the enemy Taric top lane does not have flash. In League, you don't just have your champion abilities, but you also have a choice of 2 summoner spells, and 95% of the time one of those is going to be flash. Almost every League of Legends champion should probably take flash because it's an instant blink teleport that quickly repositions you and allows you to go over walls. But sometimes, depending on the type of champion you're playing, you would prefer Ghost. The idea here is to hopefully catch out the Taric without the ability to flash away, and guess what? It works.
못 잡겠는데 이거?
应该杀不掉了。
잡긴 했다.
Faker executes a cool yet very simple combo to get this done for his team, E-Flash. Some abilities in this game can come out faster if you use Flash. Casting LeBlanc's chain first and then pressing Flash will remove the first part of the wind-up animation. This is a micro efficiency so that it can land the chain more successfully. That route onto the Taric, in addition to all of the damage level 1, is strong enough to secure first blood. You might think that this was a bit extreme. After all, they did trade 2 summoner spells for only 1, as Faker's support Yuumi on his team used one of her summoner spells called Exhaust, and Taric only used Ghost. But the important thing is noticing who the kill went to. The carry top laner who needs resources, and did not have to expend any of her own summoner spells in this engage. We see Faker scouting around the map before minions spawn at 1 minute and 5 seconds, and this means that Faker shows up to the lane ever so slightly late. The very beginning wave management is so interesting. Normally, if left totally alone, the minions will come together in a predictable pattern. The 3 melees in front all fight each other, and then the 3 casters in the back will hit those melees. Pretty understandable. But even though this is completely normal, this is not actually what Faker wants. If he was there right before the minions came together in the standard way, he could have done a nice little trick. If you right-click basic attack one of the melees, you can pull their attention to you instead, and now the wave looks a little bit different. This melee can be pulled all the way back to your own casters. This will cause your minions to win the push all by themselves, meaning that your minions will naturally win this little war against the enemy minions. And it also does one more thing very crucial. For lack of a better term, it mixes up the wave. Essentially, the minions are all spaced out now and at much different health bars from one another. Some of the minions might have 80% of their health left, others might have 50%, and some will have 20%. When you go to last hit, they will all be at different times. If the wave meets normally, and you don't do anything special, those 6 melees, 3 of yours and 3 of the enemy, will all end up being low right around the same time. So when you go to last hit them, which of course you want to do, you'll have to stand in roughly the same spot for quite a while in order to get all of the last hits. While you are busy hitting the minions for the gold, the enemy can go ahead and hit you. But by mixing up the wave in this sort of way, your opponent doesn't really have the option to beat you during the level 1. So if we go back to Faker, how can he create a natural push then if he can't do this trick about right-clicking the melee minion? Instead, what he does is hits one of the casters. He then pulls the aggro towards the left, and if you look at this enemy melee minion on the left-hand side, it will switch its focus. Instead of hitting the melee directly across from it, it will start to hit the one in the middle. This looks very counterproductive at first, because it means that Faker's middle melee minion will die faster. We said that Faker wants to push, but he's losing a minion here, right? So it's going to be 5 minions against 6. That would normally make sense mathematically, except for the fact that the way minions work in this game is that once his middle melee dies, all of those enemy melees run right into his minions. They focus him for a little bit as well, and then clump together. Now that those melee minions are clumped, they die so fast, even in a 5v6. Within 15 seconds of the laning phase starting, Faker uses nothing but basic attacks and good understanding of wave management to create an advantage. A question you might have is, where is Nemesis here? Doesn't he have a chance of stopping this? Well, yeah, he actually does, except he goes for a level 1 trick of his own to create some sort of advantage. Nemesis shows up even later to lane than Faker because he uses 2 Qs on the enemy raptor camp to stack up a tornado going into the lane. By doing this, he doesn't screw over his jungler or something like that because the camp will reset after a certain range. These raptors don't just run all over the map, they have to stay within a certain radius of their home. So normally he could come to the lane and trade confidently because he will have his Q stack tornado. But it takes some time, and Faker has seen this trick before. Ideally, now Nemesis wants to stack his Qs again and go for the last hits, but you can see the problem, and you can see why the wave is bad for him. As he goes to last hit with Q, this leaves a several second window for Faker to try to punish any possible trades. Nemesis tries to retreat, but Faker lands the chain. He is now in full control of the lane, and we just started. Nemesis walks up to land another Q on the minions because he really wants to contest this push the best that he can. He doesn't want to have to farm under his tower, and he can't deal with LeBlanc hitting him. Unfortunately, it's really hard now with how Faker set up the wave and won the level 1. Either way, Faker hits level 2 first, he skills up his W, and takes a massively successful trade onto the Yone. This very beginning of the laning phase is so often disregarded by the average player, but it is so important. Not just if you're playing LeBlanc, and not just if you're playing a champion who is strong during the early parts of the game, but for all champions and all players. You need to set yourself up into the best and most ideal situation, and for Faker, that's exactly what he's done thus far. That's not saying that by rule Nemesis has to play it poorly, because he really didn't. It's just that Faker did everything he needed to do. You take any average mid laner, any average LeBlanc player, and even into the Yone matchup, they wouldn't have done as well as Faker did here. Now that he has a huge wave pushing and took a big chunk out of his opponent, this is a very good time to explain why Faker wants to push, and in general, what pushing does for you. Why do players want to push? Well, it's not something that you always do, because there's a concept called freezing a wave, which is fantastic if you want to force your opponents into a terrible spot and have them bleed resources, but for now, let me just give you a different example for when you wouldn't want to push. You might not want to push if you're behind in the game or significantly weaker than your opponent, because pushing a wave really hard puts you in prime position for someone to come kill you. You are further away from your own tower, further away from your safe range. But that being said, pushing is very powerful if done under the right circumstances. Just as you're trying to last hit enemy minions for golden experience, the enemy needs to do exactly the same thing for yours. By pushing the wave into the turret, it means that the opponent now has to make a choice. They can farm your minions if they want, but they have to deal with you trading with them and landing abilities. But you, on the other hand, have only good things for yourself to do. Since you killed all the minions, you can either hit the turret for turret damage, or you can harass the enemy and land spells while they're stuck farming. On top of that, farming under tower is genuinely hard. Since towers do so much damage, it's very likely that you would have to waste abilities just to guarantee last hits. Any spells that are used to farm minions are spells that aren't available to trade back. No one, not even Faker, is capable of getting every single last hit under tower. It's tricky. Pushing also comes with another huge advantage. Once again, you've killed all of the enemy minions, which means that in theory, you don't really need to be here for a few seconds. You aren't missing any resources until that next minion wave comes, which means it's the perfect opportunity to roam around, move, establish vision, and get information on the map. And your opponent might have to match your roam, which they could do, but it would come at the cost of missing waves of resources to the turret. Now that he got the wave under Nemesis's turret, it means that Faker is able to utilize one of the key parts of pushing, which is of course tower harassing. He plays this sequence so well. Did you see that he got a good chunk out of Nemesis here without even the turret hitting him back? How does he do it? If you've played League before, you would know that the towers target minions first, but as soon as you hit a champion under tower, it starts hitting you, and it's brutal. In fact, recently Riot buffed turret damage even more, which means that during the early game like this, if Faker messes up and has the turret hit him, it will hurt so badly and completely ruin his laning phase. This makes diving your enemy under the turret very difficult during the early game, but here's the thing, the turrets do not attack instantly. If you time it perfectly, you can hit someone in between the turret shots. Since Faker is playing LeBlanc who can dash in and then teleport back out, he plays it perfectly by timing his harassment to not get hit by the tower. He even fits in a right-click basic attack here, which is very important. It seems small, but everything counts. Every little bit of damage is really important. This trick is easy to explain but hard to master. You will not see the average player even attempt to tower harass like this because they'll be too scared of messing it up. Faker's spacing is also immaculate here. Spacing just means where you stand, your mechanical ability to not get hit, while also hitting back on your opponent. He clearly knows the range of Yone W perfectly here. You'll see him multiple times this game just be right out of range of that cone and not take any damage. The best thing that Nemesis can do is hopefully push out the wave. He wants to clear all of Faker's minions and then recall to recover his health. This is why he goes up to hit the wave, but Faker doesn't let him and takes another great trade onto him. The wave is now completely screwed for Nemesis and perfect for Faker. This is exactly what you want to do to generate pressure and kills. You push to harass, win big trades so that you have a health advantage, and then ideally flip the lane back towards yourself. You can let the wave bounce back to you and make your opponent come towards your turret this time. It's not just about the gold that he would miss by not getting the last hits, but also the experience as well. You don't have to secure the last hits to get experience, but you do need to be within the area of minions when they die. So you can zone or push your enemy out of this range by having a significant health advantage, and you can generate a lead. For their summoner spells, both players are using Flash and Teleport. We've covered Flash, the 5-minute cooldown blink, but Teleport is the longest cooldown summoner spell in the game, allowing you to teleport to turrets during the early game, and then later on you're allowed to teleport around the map directly onto objects like minions and wards. Look at how this wave is positioned once Nemesis leaves and starts teleporting back. Faker can go ahead and shove his wave into the turret, grabbing all of the last hits. This is really important because it means that Nemesis had less gold to work with than when he went back to base. Because he will recall second, that means that Faker will have more gold in his pocket when he inevitably uses his recall and teleports back as well. The exact numbers in this case were 14 to 29 in last hits. That's a gold difference of 520 gold for the Yone and 850 gold for LeBlanc. Faker teleports back and is now of course much stronger than the Yone. The wave is coming back towards him, which is fine, so he wants to trade with Nemesis. He has such good spacing here that he's able to right-click attack and poke him down while not getting hit by anything in return. I want you to watch this W use by Faker. It's completely perfect. Not only does he use it to trade, but also by hitting the minions, it means that he's thinning out the wave. You see how these melees and this one caster are not completely full health? That means that when the wave does crash into his turret, it will reduce the amount of time that he's stuck farming under tower. The tower doesn't have to shoot as many shots at the wave since all of the minions weren't full health. Next, Faker wants to do something with the wave that is crucial to understand and master. It's called the slow push. Slow pushing is exactly what it sounds like. You want to push the wave of minions towards the enemy tower, but not instantly. He absolutely does not want to blow all of his cooldowns and all of his mana just to kill the minions as fast as possible, but instead he just goes for the last hits with his right click, and by doing that, it allows the enemy minions to stay alive for a little longer. What this does for him is it means the red minions will take more damage from the wave. He wants the minions to fight and die naturally, because if he can push Nemesis back, it could be a minion of experience and gold that he could miss. However, because this is high-rated Korean challenger, and League is most definitely not just a 1v1 game, he has to deal with an unexpected issue. The enemy top laner is this roaming around Taric playstyle, and he doesn't do too much in the top lane. He's more concerned with running around the map and helping his team. It's actually a pretty good pick, and if you don't believe me, Faker himself has tried it out and played it. The Taric knows that Yone does not want to get slow pushed in and lose out on big trades, so he comes in to help him shove the wave, and Faker can't do anything about it in a 2v1. The caveat to Taric helping him shove the wave is that experience on minion death is actually shared by champions in the area, so regardless of Taric giving Yone all the last hits on the gold, it means that Faker gets a big XP lead. It's a trade-off where Nemesis will get much less XP, but his teammates can help him fix a bad wave state. Because the Taric is there and helping his team, Faker's jungler goes down to this invade. It's a really bad situation that ultimately he could not fix or change. The silver lining to this terrible game state is that Fiora is basically laning against nobody in the top lane and eating up resources. She's getting very strong as we speak, but as it stands, the game state overall is in a bad spot, with the score being 3-7 in kills, and even though Faker has done everything he can in the lane so far, it didn't translate to any kills onto Nemesis. Very often, this is when so many players would start getting frustrated, lose their patience, or feel like their lane opponent was bailed out by their team. Faker so far has done everything he could, but he needs to continue to do so. It's vital to keep your cool and remain focused, because he still has an opportunity to come out of this lane strong due to the advantages that he created earlier. At the moment, there are no waves in the mid lane as he's cleared them all, so he uses this time to move around. He grabs the honey fruit that spawn periodically in the river to heal back to full, and this is a good time to mention why it's so important to look around your game. If you play on permanent lock screen with no understanding of wave states, it's killing your LP gains. It's totally understandable if you don't know where to be on the map, because it's sort of like you don't have one. Here's a good example of how Faker constantly adapts. While getting the fruit, he's been watching and keeping his eyes on the bottom lane fighting where Taric has been helping, and that's what he's been doing consistently over and over again. But now after clearing the next minion wave, he hovers towards the top river. And when I say hover, all it means is that he's inching and moving his way towards where he thinks fights are likely to happen. In this case, he begins to start hovering top because Fiora did take the turret in the top lane, and she's now swapped into the bottom lane to keep farming and get that turret as well. Faker's bot and support are now catching waves in the top lane, and a major objective, the Rift Herald, is available to take. He wants to hover around this area and help scout and clear for information, because Rift Herald is heavily prioritized in Korean Challenger, and this game is no exception. Now that Yone has completed his boots upgrade, his attack speed is much faster and he has a lot more agency in this lane than he did before. Nemesis now has priority. The main definition of priority in general is just someone's ability to have control. You push when you want to push, and you freeze when you want to freeze. The only way that can happen is if you're directly stronger than your lane opponent and you're able to take good trades. Being able to push, as we said, will give the player the ability to be at fights first. This is why, after a certain point, mid lane no longer becomes about trading. In most cases, both mid lane champions will hit a wave clear breakpoint after level 9, which is where one of their spells will most likely one-shot the caster minions. Faker and Nemesis go back and forth on some trading and last hitting as both junglers enter the picture, but nothing happens and Lee Sin and Nemesis just shove. The reason why Faker and his jungler don't want to take this 2v2 at this point is because Lee Sin is absurdly strong with 7 kills and 1 death. There is no way that they would win this 2v2, so Faker again uses some spare time to get the honey fruit, as it's important to stay topped off. While Faker is in the top river, he sees Nemesis overextending a bit, and Faker wants to collapse with his jungler. If he can land a chain, it could be a kill. Both commit to this call, and, well,
아이고.
Faker lands a great combo, getting purposefully hit by the Yone ultimate to stop him in his tracks. Yone ultimate will go the full distance if he doesn't hit anybody, but will stop upon colliding with a champion. It looked good except for the fact that it was a total bait because Lee was there the entire time and pulls off a nice kick into the turret. This was played extremely well by Nemesis to bait. Using the replay, we can see that Lee Sin was just barely out of vision in between the minions and this ward. This is so sick, by the way. Not only is this Korean challenger, so you would expect the Lee Sin to be good, but it's actually Faker's own teammate, Keria, the T1 support. Turns out Keria's off-roll Lee Sin is totally cracked. All of a sudden, this lane went from a good spot for Faker to actually kind of bad. His opponent has been able to last hit successfully thanks to Taric and Lee Sin helping him shove, and after Lee Sin drops the Rift Herald into the mid lane turret, it's in a spot where Faker is going to be behind. Thankfully, all is not lost as his bot lane makes a nice play hopping over the wall, catching Yone and Lulu off guard. Faker picks up 2 assists and the mid lane tower did not go down to the Rift Herald, so even though the situation isn't good, we'll take what we can get. Faker uses his next teleport to go top lane and protect the turret from the enemy Aphelios who's been pushing. He can't do too much to him other than trade back a little bit and try to last hit, since at this point Aphelios is still pretty strong. Also, Faker is smart and knows that the enemy support will make her way back up here at some point, and sure enough, Lulu does show up and they get the turret. Faker doesn't want to greed or do anything stupid here. His entire team is nowhere near him, they're all fighting and farming towards the bottom side, so his job is just to hold the wave, make sure that Aphelios and Lulu don't get the next turret, and soak up some resources. Except, he just completely and totally ignores that. Why? Well, it's because he really wants to stop the recall channel on both Aphelios and Lulu. After pressing B to recall, it takes 8 seconds of standing still to go back. Aphelios is low on mana and has gold to spend, so Faker desperately tries to stop their recalls so he can't go back and buy and get stronger and get back on the map. It turns sour very quickly though. He has to waste his flash and Aphelios commits to the play. And how close was this, you ask? Well, he gets away on literally 1 health. Yep, 1. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Maybe since it was Faker, it's 100% calculated. Who knows? You never know, man. Sometimes this guy's a freaking robot. A bit later, there's a little bit of action in the mid lane as both teams are attempting to get a pick and catch somebody out. You'll often hear people refer to this stage as A-ramming. This is a reference to another game mode in League which stands for all random, all mid. In this mode, it's a much more casual, fast-paced version of the game with some different rules. There's only one lane, it's basically the closest thing to casual deathmatch that we have, and sometimes on Summoner's Rift, you will see almost a full-on 5v5 for mid priority since both teams could use it to look for picks and turret damage. Establishing mid control is one of the most important things you can do to win. At first, it doesn't go too well because after both teams use some ultimates and really throw themselves at each other, Faker's jungler goes down. But all hope isn't lost though because Fiora teleports in on a minion, and as a team they're able to full commit onto the Aphelios and get Fiora another kill. Even though Faker was low, he W's forward and landed a little bit more damage. It's unfortunate that at this point he hasn't had any kills, just sitting on 4 assists, but at this point Fiora is starting to become a complete monster. Something really good happens next. Faker's jungler and support are able to duo the dragon right as it spawns. Not only is this a crucial objective that they for sure wanted to get, but on top of that it's very good for the champion Bel'Veth. Even if we don't get into full detail in this video, all you need to know is that she becomes stronger and evolves into her perfect form after taking a major objective like the dragon. So for the next little bit, she is specifically stronger and ready to fight. Speaking of fighting, what better place to do it than near the Rift Herald in the topside river? Faker knows this, is watching the entire time, and is ready for it. As soon as he sees that the enemy jungler starts the Rift Herald fight, he knows that he's going to want to be there, and he teleports in. Faker chooses to teleport to the vision ward that was placed in the bush, but the enemy was ready for it. He has to immediately disengage and loses half of his health instantly. Thankfully, right before his teleport, the enemy lost a crucial ultimate. The Taric ultimate was used on 4 people, which makes them invulnerable for a few seconds, but because that went down, Faker and his team just waited out and get a free kill onto Taric. The call is to full send into the enemy 5 versus 3, as Taric is dead and Nemesis was catching waves in the bot lane.
사슬! 잠깐만, 사슬! 손오브.
我的链子，等一下，我的链子。
아,
This fight is huge. Faker ends this sequence with 3 kills and an assist. Not only that, but a small important detail is that his Bel'Veth actually stole the last hit on the Rift Herald away from the Lee Sin, which means that his team got the objective, and it was a really clutch play. They now have a big push down the mid lane and get tons of gold. The buy that Faker was able to get was huge. He had over 3,000 gold and he picked up an item called Zhonya's Hourglass. This is a very important detail. Zhonya's is an item in League that isn't very expensive for a full completed option, and it doesn't have the greatest gold efficiency, which is to say that the value of the raw stats and power isn't as cost effective as other items, but what makes Zhonya's worth buying is because of its active. This item gives you an ability to be out of the game for a couple seconds. You can't take damage or get hit by anything that will stun you or impair your movement, so it's important to use this in close situations to save yourself. A cool interaction with LeBlanc and Zhonya's Hourglass is that the second part of your chain will still go through just fine. As long as you throw out the chain first and it connects, if you use your stasis, the chain will still complete onto the enemy. Okay, so this game is very close, 16-13 in kills, and although Faker's team has made an awesome comeback thus far, the enemy still has very strong members. Lee Sin and Aphelios at this point in the game are completely powerful and ready to fight, so you wouldn't think that the enemy is going to give up on this game very soon. Surely they have a decent chance of still winning. But if you look at the timer, and remember that in the beginning of this video I said this was a 20-minute forfeit, you might be really confused. However, sometimes Faker just does Faker things. The GOAT is the GOAT. Watch this. Game over. GG. Forfeit. Okay, what the heck just happened? Faker goes nuts here. This catch onto the enemy carry Aphelios is ridiculous. He uses his ultimate to mimic his W dash, closing the gap a little more and lands a full combo with the chain onto him in a stupidly tight window. I know that I've said this 10 times, I know that you know this by now, but remember, this is a challenger game. He's playing against other pros. Do you see how good the enemy Taric and Lulu are here? The two supportive champions desperately try to body block in front of Aphelios the instant Faker goes in. They try their best to block the chain, but somehow he still lands it and pops the Zhonya's. This pick is legendary, and once Fiora sees that the Aphelios is in trouble, she teleports in, making this a full-on team fight. There are two vital details to think about here that allowed Faker to do this, something that he had to pay very close attention to and react instantly. The first is understanding that his support Yuumi is attached to him. Yuumi is a support that directly attaches to an ally. She helps shield and heal them while basically being inside them, and the enemy isn't capable of hitting Yuumi. Faker would not have done this most likely if he doesn't have the Yuumi, because once he lands the chain, Yuumi is able to use her own ultimate, which allows her to deal damage and lock down targets in this rectangle. The second key point is that we saw a misplay from the enemy just seconds before this that gave Faker the opportunity to go in. The enemy support is a Lulu, and her ultimate makes an ally big and gives them health. Enemies near the Lulu ultimate will also get knocked around and slowed, so it's an incredibly valuable tool. The mistake wasn't necessarily just Lulu's fault, but there was clearly a miscommunication. Lee Sin was hitting the Zeri, and Lulu used her ultimate on him. Lulu's ultimate is so powerful here, and if Lee Sin just committed to the play, it's possible that they could have gotten a pick onto the enemy carry. Instead, Faker jumps on the opportunity and pretty much makes the game-winning play. Off of the back of this incredible fight, his team was able to secure the Baron, which is the most important objective in the entire game, and it spawns right at 20 minutes. They can pick up a bunch of gold and experience, and at this point, Fiora was probably way too strong anyway since she'd been farming up a storm the entire game. The enemy agrees that they don't have a chance after this fight, and they surrender at 20. What a game, and what a play by the greatest of all time. Thank you very much for watching. Hey, I just wanted to let you guys know that I'll be streaming much more often on Twitch these days, so make sure to give my Twitch a follow in the description down below and on your screen right now. I'll be streaming my League of Legends ranked games going for Master Tier, but on top of that, just playing some games with you guys and doing fan games for normals as well. It doesn't matter what rank you are, you can be bronze or iron or whatever. There's not some kind of skill requirement, it's all for fun in games anyway. And I'll be answering all of your guys' questions, and as well as the fact that you'll get to see more of this crazy husky that I have. Good boy, good boy. So anyway, make sure to follow my Twitch in the description down below, and thank you guys so much.